So hello and welcome to The Last Word, the podcast from Ordinary Hero that brings powerful conversations to the forefront with people making real impact across our industry and beyond. So today we're joined by someone who's been at the heart of Ordinary Hero for a whole decade, quietly and most brilliantly driving change from the inside out. She's known for her love of numbers, calculator, obviously, unique perspective on the industry and relentless commitment to doing things better. From finance to sustainability to shaping the future of how we work, her fingerprints are everywhere. So whether you're a spreadsheet lover, a sustainability advocate, or just curious about what really it takes to keep an agency running smoothly from behind the scenes, this one's for you. So welcome to The Last Word and welcome to the show, Nikki. Let's dive in. Let's go for it. Where did it all begin? So let's talk a bit about numbers, calculations, planning. They've always been your thing, but events, how did that come about?
Purely by accident. But first of all, that was an intro. Thanks. Events, pure accident. I've always worked doing accounts, as you said, but mainly in manufacturing. So bits and bobs and putting things together and building something new. I had the opportunity to meet with Heather and was introduced to the world of events. And what a world and a whirlwind of 10 years it's been. When I first met Heather, she made what I thought was a really funny joke about, one day you'll be looking at the accounts and the next day you'll be looking for dancing penguins, which I kind of laughed off. That's funny. But I mean, we haven't got the dancing penguins, but we have had camels in bow ties and things like that. So it's, it's a bit random, but it's interesting. I think I've had a couple of days over the last 10 years where I haven't wanted to get up. That's a good yardstick.
That's a good start. That's a good start.
It's a fascinating world. And I think because I knew nothing about it, because it is a hidden industry, and, we sort of say if an event's done well, you don't know about the industry. You only hear about the industry when something goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And so it's luckily, I guess, I hadn't really understood anything about the events world. So it's a fascinating and interesting world. It's
a journey.
Busy. It is a journey.
So talking of journeys, a dedicated employee for 10 years. Well done you. 10 years making amazing milestones, and you joined back when it was still Heather Robinson Ltd. So tell us about that, why you took that leap, because obviously you've talked about sort of meeting Heather and your dancing penguins and how you've gone from widgets and gadgets to actually from the other side, on the agency side. So what made you take the leap? What was it that took you to a crazy place?
Say, why did you sign up? What were you thinking?
Yeah. So to be honest, right at the start, it was, I'd just had my youngest daughter and I was just looking for a very easy, couple of days a week, just doing my old sort of just accounts, run-of-the-mill accounts. And it's evolved.
Because it was actually only initially part-time, wasn't it?
Yeah, like 15 hours a week or something. But I hope Heather would agree. I think that, there's a lot that I've been able to bring to the party. And, we've seen the business expand and change. And because we're, a boutique agency, we've been able to adapt and, take advantage of situations that have happened in the world and ride the bad. So, but yeah, it's evolved into more than just bean counting. And the thing I'm most proud of through my whole career is being told I'm not a typical finance person, whatever level that was at. I'm not a typical finance person. I want to understand why. I want to understand how. And Heather embraces that, thankfully. So, things like going on site, for example, and experiencing an event gives me the knowledge to be able to bring that to the numbers and understand what I'm reporting on. You can't say no to someone or question something if you don't understand it, in my opinion. So because I'm given that license to be able to do that, it has a massive effect.
And an advantage for the client.
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. So you do have a very different approach. So you've said before, not coming from an events background has helped shape that approach. And you do and see things very differently to most finance teams and definitely from most finance people I've ever come across in my career. So what exactly does that mean in practice, and how do you think that has helped Ordinary Hero to thrive?
So I think first and foremost, my role is to protect the company's assets at the end of the day. That's my role. However, in the events world, I've become the gatekeeper of the client's funds, the money that the client is investing. And let's face it, we're talking, anything from 20,000 to several million. So, that becomes my money at the end of the day. And I'm very protective of that, because I know what I would want to hear and know if it was my money. So I take on that role, essentially, of becoming the client for a lot of the life cycle of the event, questioning, but also suggesting it, improvements, or, we talk about environmental issues, sustainability, et cetera, lots of different elements to be able to manage and get the best bang for buck for the event, for the client, and for the audience of that event.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm guessing there's no such thing as a typical day. Your role is anything but one dimensional. So from day-to-day products, your projects, you're leading our sustainability mission. But genuinely, what does an average day look like for you?
Good question.
Varied, yes. I mean, again, at the end of the day, I'm protecting the business, but we're looking at the business strategically. We're looking at the business from all angles. So it's because we're a small team, it's important we've all got the same mission and vision. So the business is obviously, it comes first. When the events are live, when that event life cycle is taking place, it can be anything from finding, breaking down, the expenses that have been incurred, trying to find out, if there's any changes that have happened to the original budget, managing those, seeing, what ifs. What if we upgraded the hotel? What if we went to a different destination? It's lots of those sort of what if questions. And then analysing the numbers. We pride ourselves on trying to think of everything. It feels like quite a bold statement, but often we may seem more expensive than other agencies, for example, in a pitch situation. And I think this is where some of the differences come about, because I have no preconceptions over what a finance team does in events, because I'd never worked in events as a finance person. So it's kind of developed into this role that is quite different, you know. As you know, like a lot of the time I'm involved in the pitches, that's unusual from what I understand. To me, it's normal because I haven't experienced any other way in this industry. So, yeah, it's...
I think the clients really respect that though as well. And I think they really value it. And I think this is the message we get from a lot of the clients and, you know, pre-post event, and they value the fact that we put so much importance on the budget because the brief is only the brief if it's got a budget attached to it. And I think the fact that we are, as you say, safeguarding that budget for them gives them confidence that we will not just deliver a great event, whatever that looks like, but it will be done without sort of any nasty surprises. It'll be done within the parameters.
If something happens.
Exactly, or if the brief changes, they have up to date. And I think this is another critical thing. You talk about the analysis part, because you'll always offer to lay out things and how they like it.
Exactly, and this is the other thing, straight at the, you know, from the offset of being awarded a job, one of the first questions we ask is, what sort of reporting do you want? Are there certain KPIs you want measured? And then we work out how often they need that updated, how detailed it needs to be. So, you know, we're offering sort of value added.
Well, I suppose it's a bespoke service, really. It's not this is the system, this is what it generates, and here you go, here's your budget, and we just talk about the same thing, you know, week in, week out. You're offering them, like you say, added value and way more than probably what they're bargaining for.
Yeah, and I think it gives them dynamic decision-making opportunities then.
Yeah, I mean, we've had situations, haven't we, where clients... Well, I mean, COVID is a typical example, isn't it? I know everyone talks about COVID, but, you know, when something unexpected happens, we are knowledgeable enough with the situation as it is, in terms of numbers I'm talking, that we are able to pretty quickly understand the impact of that unexpected situation. So, you know, whether that's... Heathrow Airport, you know, power outage, we can pretty quickly understand. And because I'm got my finger on the pulse of those numbers, I'm very quick to be able to understand what that impact is to the client, because I'd want to know. Yeah. You know, that's the thing. So, yeah.
And you talked about earlier, you know, you're it's a small team, but it's probably one for you actually, Heather. You know, the business model of Ordinary Hero. Talk to me about why you, and in these times actually, and COVID times, and actually the times we're finding ourselves in at the moment, actually, I really buy into it. But tell the listeners why you have always set your sights on the business model of Ordinary Hero.
Well, funnily enough, we were talking about it, I think, yesterday, weren't we? Because Heather Robinson Ltd, well, it was actually Heather Robinson Live Communication, I think, to begin with. There's a whole other story. Started in 2008, and the last kind of big, not including COVID, big kind of upheaval, recession-y type period. And having come from very large agencies, it had become quite clear in the sort of latter years that that model didn't particularly work anymore because the budgets weren't there. And therefore something had to change. So the model was very deliberate from the outset, that it was going to be a small core team and we would buy in expertise effectively, because the good thing about an events industry is that it's a very mature freelance market. And actually, in my view, I think the best people tend to be in that freelance arena. And it means that you can get the right people doing the right job at the right time. You're not just kind of seeing who's available in the workforce and they're getting shoved out the door when perhaps it's not their skill set or their whatever. So that was a very deliberate decision. But finding somebody that could shoehorn into this slightly bonkers environment, but also would work in a small business environment because, as Nikki said, we're a team and we'll all be doing all sorts of different roles at different times. And although we've got a small core team with expertise in each area, we'll get the job done. And that might mean that we're all doing random stuff at odd times of the day to make that happen. So it was important to find that kind of personality, but also the fundamental job was to safeguard the business. And also Nikki came on board as the business was expanding and needed to put in the kind of checks and everything, and also the systems, which I think anybody that knows me will know I have quite a short attention span, and therefore, no judging, and therefore somebody who hasn't would be better at driving these sorts of things forward. So Nikki moved the business into a different arena effectively by putting all these checks and balances in place, but at the same time has never lost sight of the kind of the fundamental part, which is there is no business unless we deliver events, and we deliver them well and we deliver them on budget. So it's a kind of it's quite a mix to keep on top of. And what's great is the clients recognise that is what we think sets us apart from a lot of other companies. And as you say, coming into the pitches, really key part of it. Clients speaking to you directly. Yeah. And I think, we've worked in different agencies and the same agencies, and I don't ever remember that happening anywhere else, where a client would have a direct contact with the financial controller.
Finance was always finance. It was, billing in, billing out. Yeah, that was it. It was never as integral as your role within this team. Never. You just didn't even, as colleagues, we never even saw them. They sat in a room and tapped away on their computers, and that was it. You saw them at the Christmas party and maybe the odd summer drink or whatnot. So it's a massive advantage of any pitch, any sales process, to have somebody as astute as you looking at numbers and crunching them as firmly as you do, because it adds. I wish clients got that a bit more. I think it's probably because it's new and they're not used to the business model of what we run at, and they're used to big agencies. Anybody who's listening from a client's perspective, I think it's good to hear from your perspective why this model works. So I think
I don't know whether it's me, Heather, a combination of the two, or whatever combo that looks like. But my background, I've always wanted to understand the business. Working in manufacturing, my first week, I spent any new business, I spent a day looking at the balance sheet and the numbers, and a week on the shop floor. I want to understand, what does it look like to put a rivet in a bit of metal? What, and how does that feel? And why it takes 5 minutes and not 5 seconds. It's all very well to sit back and go, we need to improve efficiency. If you don't understand what's involved in that job, I feel you can't, give a complete thought through answer. So whether it's some of that, but like I say, I want to understand why we have to have, I don't know, whatever piece of equipment it is, or down to questioning expenses, for example. Why do the event managers have 2 drinks at the end of the night? Well, I know from being on site, you need to come down from your day of managing that event. It's not unreasonable for somebody to have 2 pints or half a bottle of wine or whatever that looks like, because I've experienced it. Okay, I'm looking as an outsider looking in, but I've seen it and I've lived it. So I understand that's an important part of it because they're people, and it's important to us as a business as well to look after those people.
Yeah. Because there's long hours and there's
Absolutely.
no doubt about it.
But as if I was a black and white person, why on earth is there a bill for 200 quid for, team drinks? Oh, brilliant. Lovely. I'm sat in my ivory tower looking at receipts going, that's £200 that could have paid the electricity or whatever. But, I understand and appreciate it's an important element of that event for those people to have a moment,
Wind down. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the amount of detail that we particularly look at in our budget. So we have summaries because we know a lot of people like me like a nice small snapshot, a small picture that I can take in one shot. But we also know that the devil's in the detail, and that you need to know exactly where those line items are. And the line items are a bit of a sort of stick to beat yourself with, as well as important, because clients feel comfortable when they've seen, because they're big numbers, as Nikki says, into multi-million pounds or euros or whatever this currency is. And you need to justify that. You can't just, say, well, it's going to be this. So it's got to be in there. And I think that attention to detail helps build that picture really in a robust way, which hopefully further down the line means that things like reconciliations are much more straightforward to do. But also the client can then look into the, because they'll have their own internal spreadsheet, which we sometimes do for them, which they can then cross-check and also feel comfortable. Well, that's that. And if something does change, because the brief does change, you can then justify that by demonstrating where that impact has been. And going back to the dynamic reporting means that they can make those informed decisions. So it's a really kind of symbiotic relationship. And I think that's why the clients like it. And as you say, some clients perhaps aren't familiar with it, so a bit more sort of unsure of it. But the ones that understand it and use it as a service effectively really benefit from it. And I think that's been borne out by sort of, feedback, comments, whatever.
And the relationships that have been built over however many years.
10. So the other benefit of Ordinary Hero is that you have many different arms. So you've got Heather Robinson UK, you've got Journey, you've got BV. So tell me and the listeners the benefits of that when it comes to crunching numbers.
So the joy of Brexit was the biggest driver for us opening a Dutch office. When the Brexit referendum happened, we had a strategic meeting to see, what were the risks or opportunities of Brexit, as it became known. The fear was at that point that we may not be able to operate in or operate for European clients. And at the time, the vast majority of our business was European based. So obviously that would have had a huge impact on the business. So we investigated the best solution to mitigate the risk of not being able to operate in Europe, potentially. As it is, obviously, as the years have gone by since that referendum, it's slightly easier than first thought. However, there's huge barriers that attract a huge cost to the business. But we chose to set up Heather Robinson BV in the Netherlands. We have an office in the Netherlands, which enables us to analyse the best route for a client given where the event is taking place. So obviously this is all done with compliance. There's no trying to avoid tax or anything. It's to make easy trading with European partners as well as clients.
Yeah.
So that's why we have BV.
Excellent. So we're going to move on to sustainability because we know that's one of your big passions. It's something you've really championed. And I guess, why does it matter so much to you? And why should our clients and our prospects care?
Everyone should care about sustainability and all that comes with it. It's solely for the survival of the planet. You know, even the most dedicated non-believer must understand by now that we are having an impact on the planet and need to reduce our footprint on said planet for future generations. However, that aside, I think it's just good practice to reduce as well as recycling and, you know, reuse, recycle. I think it's a really important message, but also can be an economic benefit. There's a lot of benefits for clients using recycled or recyclable elements to their events. But also it's about reducing the requirement. You know, it's why do we have to have plastic plates, or, you know, it's printed items, or, you know, we're just using them for the day. Why, you know, are there alternative solutions to these elements? And, you know, Heather again is an advocate of this. You know, I especially, because I love it, attend a lot of shows, trade shows and things like that, and attend a lot of talks to understand the issues behind the message. Because I think a lot of people don't understand what sustainability means.
They just read the headline, as
Exactly.
it were. Yeah.
And then, you know, it's coming back and applying that to events. So, you know, our kind of vision is to be a leading voice in the events industry, because obviously events has been notoriously bad for sustainability. You know, the amount of waste that comes off the back of an event is sometimes absolutely shocking. So, you know, we are attempting to be a leading voice in that arena for many, many reasons. But, you know, ultimately, everyone's aim should be to reduce their footprint on the earth.
So you're leading the charge, obviously, and you're charging towards B Corp. Well, we've got the EcoVadis bronze. I think it was silver, but like you say, as more people go on to it, there's different dynamics and change, and sort of you go up and down the scale.
Yeah.
But you are going for gold. That's your ultimate aim.
Yeah.
So what's our current standing? What does the road to gold look like? Because I should imagine that's no mean feat at all. And what would it mean for the business to get there?
I mean, for me personally, I would be over the moon to reach that point from a personal perspective. From a business perspective, I think it's really important to be a leader in this arena. We chose EcoVadis. I think it's important to understand why we chose that. So we chose EcoVadis because it is a really great system with the methodologies that it has. It levels up, and you can compare an SME with a multinational. You know, you can compare us to Toyota, for example. It enables a small business to measure themselves against very large businesses, and a lot of the accreditations don't allow that or don't enable that. So EcoVadis was a really great platform to enable that. On top of that, the benefit of it is it's identified as one of the leading accreditations in a lot of the industries that we work in. So obviously, as we've said, there's a lot of accreditations out there, but that's the main reason why we chose EcoVadis, because it enables us to measure ourselves against very large businesses.
So it brings me on to the next question, actually, choosing the right accreditations. Obviously, there's so many sustainability accreditations out there. I should imagine it's overwhelming, but how did you decide to go? You talked about EcoVadis and measuring and enabling to measure against the large, but how do you stay on top of the fast moving landscape? Because I should imagine there's something new coming in every day, going pick me, and so how do you choose?
It's understanding what we want to get out of it. What do we want to get out of it, and then what delivers the best method of achieving that? There's loads, but EcoVadis, we're looking at 4 ESG, so 4 governance, 4 environmental, socio-economic issues. Our aim, as I say, is to be a leading voice in the events industry for this, and part of that is looking at lots of elements. So we could look at locally sourced food or vegan options for an event. Things that it covers such a broad area. There's such a broad spectrum of elements, but it's understanding what you want to achieve as a business and then applying that to that framework. So, for example, we're aligning ourselves and our sustainability vision to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, for example. So we can locally make a difference, and when all of those businesses make a local difference, it makes a national difference, and when the national difference makes a global difference. So it's small steps that add up to a big impact.
So in terms of supporting clients, and often sustainability comes with a price tag. So why should I be paying for this over that? Well, that's the cheapest option, because often, and this is not to call out procurement because they do have a fantastic role to play, but sometimes it goes down to the crux of who's cheapest.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when we've looked at everything, that budget has been checked and cross-checked again, I's dotted, T's crossed. When we're on the table, how can we then prove or guide the client in saying, actually, sustainability, you should pay more for, because actually it does add up to that, we're all playing our part, and sometimes it's not worth the cheaper cost, it should be paid for. So is there anything that you would want to say to any clients or prospects or anybody with that kind of role, why they should, benefit from that sustainability piece?
I mean, probably the first thing to say is it's not always more expensive now. It can be, if you're building a big stage or something similar, sustainably sourced and managed and tracked wood, for example, could be 25-30% more expensive. I think the question comes back down to the client and the importance they place on sustainability in their business. So obviously as an SME, we don't have a responsibility to report such things. Large businesses do. So they have a requirement to report on that level now of items that they're purchasing. So in addition to that, you're attracting, most people have sustainability in their head nowadays when they're looking to work for a business. I know a lot of people look at a business's sustainability report and because they're interested and they want to know the values of the company. So I think coming back to the question, it's not always more expensive, but it can be. But it all depends on the goals and the visions of the business itself. Because events, whilst I think sometimes they're seen as a small element, it can be a massive impact, from carbon footprint point of view, for example. An event can have a huge footprint that could have a big impact on their reporting, So it would be...
make it more meaningful, though, because, sometimes, it could be a ticking of the box exercise. We've been more sustainable on this event, tick, tick, tick. But how can we make it more sustainable, more involved for them and more meaningful for them?
I think over the years, it's less of a tick box, I have to say. I think people are much more engaged in it. I think it does come down to money sometimes. So a budget's often finite. Sometimes obviously the cost of it will come into play, but I think it's less of a tick box exercise now, or I'd like to think it is. And the clients that I talk to about these subjects are often really engaged in it and want to understand, the role that sustainability and reduction of production of stuff can be made.
Well, I think it's also part of our job. If they want a piece of communication or an event or a program that is representative of their brand, and their brand, one of their top 3-5 values, visions, missions, statements, whatever, is sustainability, then they need to build it into their content. They need to build it into whatever this is that we're creating for them. So I think we have a responsibility to help drive that forward as well, to sort of make it more of a conversation than just, like you say, just a tick box.
And part of when we get a briefing, we look at the business and we look at their values and we look at what they're trying to achieve, and it can, it's, as it should be, forms part of our response because it's it's bigger than just that one day or one event or series of events.
So supporting the clients better, we might have answered this question, but I'm going to answer ask the question. So without calling anyone out, what could clients do better when it comes to working sustainably, but not in a critical way, but in a way that genuinely helps them get the most out of what they're doing?
From a sustainability
yeah. So sometimes we don't know what we don't know. But, how can we open their eyes to see things in a different way, as opposed to you talked about, pitch, forms part of our pitch and our response to tender, etc. We're not just putting that page in or a couple of pages in for sustainability for good measure and we're ticking the box.
Yeah.
How can we then get them to see that?
So I think some of our clients, one in particular comes to mind, is very eco-conscious, and they want to measure their carbon footprint, which we will do for a client if it's another added value that we can offer if that's required. They want to measure it, and so we're able to look at a typical carbon footprint for what we've proposed and ways to reduce that. So, for example, vegan food might reduce the carbon footprint by X tons, blah, 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 etc. Or ethically sourced wood or materials. So you can measure that, and that's a tangible thing that you can offer a client.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit of an education process, I think, as well, that there are other ways of doing things. So, there is still an awful lot of stuff, print and stuff. People are moving more towards digital, but it's not always the case, and sometimes a bit of an education process with that. And not shipping great wads of stuff around the world, and all of that adds up pretty quickly. So it's just thinking slightly broader than perhaps what is very formulaic in their mind. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And some are better than others at that.
Yeah. So we've talked about the sustainability and the B. I think B Corp was mentioned not so long ago about going towards the B Corp as well. But let's talk about budgeting. So it gives clients and customers complete financial clarity throughout that event life cycle. We've talked about how you make sure that everything is budgeted for. So when we are in pitch situations, we're often deemed as more expensive by X amount percentage, because there isn't any surprises down the line. And we've all been there in terms of, so here comes another invoice after the event because we've reconciled everything and it's way more than you expected because they hadn't thought of everything, or indeed strategically left it out to win the business. And let's be honest about that. That's what happens, and we know that. But why might we appear expensive, but why is that a good thing? Again, having that argument not necessarily argument, but debate with said customer, it's often a hard one to prove that we're right. Not to say that they're wrong, but actually our way is an open way.
It's a really difficult question. It's a really difficult subject to broach sometimes. Again, we've had the conversation, Heather and I, well, why don't we do that? Why don't we? But, I'm really proud of the fact that we can develop a really full, complete budget down to, how many nights in a hotel and the average cost of a hotel in that particular city, or and down to looking at the electricity and the average charge for electricity, etc. So, we're really looking at finite detail at pitch stage, which is an expensive thing to do in itself, to be fair. but we feel it's really important, and we're proud to stand by those budgets and not have those surprises at the end. You know, as if I were on the other side of the table, I would not be happy if I'd been promised an event for $500,000 and then came back with a bill for an extra 100. You know, I would not be happy. So
I think that's the key point, actually. We're in it for the long term, not just for the quick win.
Exactly. It's the relationships that we're building, and our clients trust our budgeting.
That was literally my next question. Yeah.
You know, they trust, and a lot of the time, I hope I'm not talking out of turn here, but a lot of it, or some of the clients, are coming back because of the budgeting, that it is well managed, that they know where they stand. There's no surprises, unless the brief changes. But you know, in 10 years, we've not had one budget over what we've estimated. We've always either hit the budget or come under budget, and I'm really proud of that. And long may it remain. But it's a difficult conversation to have with a client, to say, you know, your last 3 events, have you hit budget?
Well, that's even more difficult when dealing with a procurement role as well, because they will be buying purely on a number, not on anything else. And then the stakeholders will have an input, but certainly the initial the initial sort of review of a proposal will be at that level if procurement's involved. And it's a really tough call for us every time to have that conversation. Do we compromise and just go under and just wing and prayer it later on, and come back and then don't deliver for the stakeholder, in our view, because we're coming in over budget. But the reason for it is it builds trust. And I think if the client feels that everything's transparent, they've had the same view from the outset, they've had dynamic reporting through, so they're always at every stage know where they're up to, and it's a fair price. We're not the cheapest by any stretch, but we're certainly not the most expensive, and we do benchmark to check that. That client then knows that they can trust us as a business to safeguard the budget that is there and report accurately on that spend, and
deliver what we've promised.
And deliver what we've promised, exactly.
It's not the moon on a stick.
No.
It's real. It's achievable, and it's real.
Yeah. And small variations might not be too bad when you're dealing with small numbers, but once you're into the millions, small variations or deviations from the plan have a big impact. So,
but picking up on something Heather just said, about not being the most expensive and not being the cheapest, we benchmark our rate card, for example, so we know that our rate cards are comparable. And let's face it, when you're in the service industry and a creative industry, you can't compare one pitch with another pitch. It's
like for like.
Like for like, it's rate card that you can compare, the cost of a production manager or an executive producer, for example. You can't compare somebody's creative solution with somebody else's creative solution on a purely financial basis. And that's the difficulty. And that's the challenge, is to explain that.
Absolutely. So how do we manage suppliers to maintain that level of financial control? Because obviously you have to have a very big stick to beat them up with, I should imagine. You are the gatekeeper, but quite rightly so, because like you say, you're having that budget as your own money. That's how you would look at it. So you have, how is it that you maintain that level?
So, but equally, we empower our freelancers to manage that element of the budget. So Obviously, for things like ISO accreditation, we are, if a freelancer says, I'd like to use supplier X, we obviously investigate supplier X for quality reasons, price, etc. So that's number one. But we, like I say, you're empowering the people that can make those decisions to make those decisions for the right reason. We always look at our supplier base, at both value, but most importantly, quality. Because at the end of the day, if the quality's not there, and we want to trust our partners as much as we want our clients to trust us. So it's a very, it's when it works really well.
And I think, again, as I said before, we aim to pay a fair price, and we aim to charge a fair price. And I think that sometimes gets a little bit lost as well, when the pressure is so immense on cutting costs across the board that either quality goes, or worse still, things like safety goes, or well-being, whatever it may be. There is a price to be paid if you drop below that fair price for a fair job.
But equally, I should imagine not only do all of those things disappear, but that's when you start to go from an experience level to maybe a not so experienced level, because then you're getting cheaper, but equally you're then not getting the experience. And I think from a client's perspective, a customer's perspective, you want the best man on the job, as it were. So, how do we, talk us through, we've talked about the business model, but, from when you're budgeting and you're looking at those rate cards, what level are you putting in to said client to present back to them, as opposed to, because we do, I wouldn't call them freelancers actually, because they have been probably longer than you, Nikki, in terms of over a decade. So they're more of a permalancer, aren't they? They are part of the team. They just happen to have experience in other agencies because that's what they do, and then actually they bring that back. So there's so many positives to this business model. It's we could talk about it all day, but
you're absolutely right. It's the same team that comes in every time. It just means that the client's not paying for them when they're not being used, and that works across the whole board at that point. So the model was, as I say, was deliberate when it was set up, and I think that is to make sure that we always have the best people doing the right job. A lot of the time people look at events and think, well, how hard can it be? It's booking a hotel, it's doing a bit of PowerPoint. Well, you can get PowerPoint on your laptop, and I can pick up booking.com and I can book a hotel. So it's, what are you here for? And I think, there is an education process when you hit that kind of conversation, but it's all very easy until something goes wrong. So, when the ash cloud hits, or when war breaks out and you've got somebody who can't get back to their homeland because they've stopped all flights. What happens then? Because I'm guessing the junior that's come in and been put on this job wouldn't actually understand, or if someone's taken ill on site and needs to be repatriated, would they know? There's all these kind of things that happen. So there is a real value, and that's aside from all the sort of front-end creativity and world of knowledge of communication, destination, venue, technology, all of that stuff is you kind of expect all of that. But there's the bit behind all of that makes the whole thing run seamlessly. And when things do happen, react quickly and effectively to minimize any input. So there's all of those things in there. And this is why we focus on right people, right job, because whether it's a technical thing, whether it's a venue thing, whether it's a comms thing, whether it's a sustainability thing, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's diversity and inclusion issue, there's a whole host of bits that go into the melting pot, and we want to make sure that we can afford to use the right people for the right thing. And that doesn't mean they've all got to be super expensive, because an admin job can be done by an admin person. Brilliant, that's what they're there for. They're really good at it. let them do that. But somebody that is an expert in AI or technology or whatever it is, or knows every venue under the sun and knows the right people to call in Outer Mongolia, we want to call the right person on the right job, because that's what they're there for. And we couldn't do that. We couldn't have all of that skill set under one roof. It's not physically possible or financially possible, because someone's paying for it. So the only way we can remain competitive for our clients but still give them the best people is to have the model we've got, which is an extremely well-developed and well-versed talent pool with a core team of sort of HODs, head of departments, who will help build the right team for a specific project. And that gives us best bang for the buck for the client, but it more importantly gives us the right person doing the right job. And that's kind of why we do it.
And the passion for it.
Because,
You wouldn't do it if you weren't passionate about it.
No, but
if you worked out your hourly rate, you definitely wouldn't do it. Yeah.
But it does make a difference. If you do what you love, you're not really working, are you? So if you're trying to shoehorn something, doing the whole square peg round hole scenario of, well, you've got to be the logistics person on that, and they're completely not logistics, they're admin, technical, whatever. Fish out of water, and it's like, oh, I'll have to be here. Okay, I'll put a smile on my face. But having the right person for the right job,
and it jeopardizes. It not only jeopardizes the brilliance of the event, whatever it might be, but it jeopardizes. It's risky, and Nikki will tell you, I'm all about mitigating risk. I am the most risk-averse person, so I want to make sure if I'm sending somebody out on a job, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's, that's how we make the model work.
Yeah, fantastic. So this leads me on nicely to Utopia and the Utopian brief. So let's imagine you have, in fact, I'm going to ask you both because I think it's pertinent to ask you both. If you had a magic wand, one of my favourite questions, what would the perfect client brief look like? And what would you love to receive? And what does Utopia look like from your side of the desk? Nikki.
That's a good question. I think it's always important to have a budget. In my or our opinion, a budget's not complete unless you have a budget. A brief is not complete unless you have a budget. If I was buying a house, I wouldn't, I'd want to give some sort of guide as to what I can afford to buy. I wouldn't expect, for an estate agent to know, what level of house I'm looking at. I could be looking at a mansion or a flat. It's, so I think an honesty in a brief is really important. If you're honest and open, you'll get the best response from the team. So, for me personally, I love a bit of sparkle, love a bit of stuff, something interesting. And a bit of sparkly entertainment is always lovely in my view. So an honest budget, whether that's a 10 grand party or a multi-million-pound training event, a fair, honest budget, clear, and a bit sparkle.
What about you, Heather? What does that Utopia look like?
Well, obviously, I love a bit of sparkle. And obviously, budget's key. There is no point in having a brief without a budget because the old, how long's a piece of string? And I understand where clients are coming from when they say, we don't want to restrict you, we don't want to, but I have to say, if you start throwing numbers at them, so we've got, should we go for 1 million then? They'll start to panic and start to twitch until you go 500, 400, 300, and you see the face and you go, okay, it's 300 then. So we've got a budget. And I think it's pointless without one because will either aim too high or too low. And if you're in a pitch situation, and Joe Blogsing down the road did it last year, they know it's 300,000. So they're going to go in at 300,000 or maybe 29999.9, but they will get it around the right figure. The rest of them, us included at that point, are just pitching in the dark. And I'm not sure whether clients really recognise all the time how expensive it is to pitch. And it's not just time. I mean, time in itself is extortionate, but a big pitch can cost, upwards of 20,000 sterling, euro to deliver. And you've only got to do, a couple of those and then work backwards and work out how much net profit that equates to. And that's a big old job you've got to deliver for absolutely nothing. So it's, reverse engineering the cost of a pitch is sometimes quite an interesting thing for clients in procurement to do before they send out a brief to 7 agencies with no budget and kind of, just to get some ideas, because it's, particularly in this economic climate, it's tough. And, you don't want to lose good people and good agencies because they can't afford to pitch. And I think that's a really important thing to note too. And we understand the need for, benchmarking and finding new agencies. And we get that, we do it with our suppliers. We look at our suppliers and but there is also a place for being measured in that kind of approach, and therefore giving a fair and honest budget, thinking about how many sort of people you want to ask to pitch, and maybe doing it differently. I wrote a piece a while back on the best pitch ever, which I still stand by, which was for an ad agency, and it was their 25th anniversary, I think it was, or something. They had the whole staff from kind of owner to intern to cafe operator in their building. Everybody was going to this event. So it was a big old event, and they weren't sure where in the world they were going to go for it. And it was about 800 people or something, maybe even more, global audience. So rather than getting everybody, because they're an agency, they understood, and rather than getting everyone to pitch it, they first of all did some research themselves on the internet, because that's what it's there for. They narrowed down their kind of wish list. Then they had chemistry meetings with those agencies to decide if they got on, basically, a bit like speed dating. Could they work with those agencies? And then they tendered it, and they tendered it only with destination to, I think it was to 3 agencies in the end. And they appointed on that because they wanted to be a partner in developing the actual brief. They didn't, because I think, again, as most people recognise, when you get a brief, 9 times out of 10, the actual end result is completely different from what the pitch started off from. So they recognised all that, being a creative agency. So they did, as I say, research, chemistry meeting, tendered with what was a physical destination, and then they worked with that chosen agency to develop the concept brief and everything. And it was probably one of the best events I've worked on, because it just felt organic, fair, all of that sort of stuff. It was brilliant.
But we've had feedback from clients when, we ask, well, what's the budget? We haven't given you a budget because the agencies will just come in and spend the budget. Well, that's the budget. So, we're going to give you the best bang for your budget. So if you've got 100,000, then say 100,000, and we'll use that 100,000 for the best outcome. So, to say you'll just spend the money, yes,
that's what we do.
We will.
That's the idea.
But also, there's
But we will only spend that money. We won't.
Go over.
If we say we'll spend 100,000, we'll spend 100,000.
Yeah.
But similarly, if we think it's an unrealistic budget, we'll feed back. And we have done that before now. Before we go and present, we try and do it if it's long enough lead time. Sometimes you only get the information just before the pitch. But if there's enough lead time, a sensible lead time, we'll go back prior and say, we're not going to hit this budget. What would you like us to do? And they 9 times out of 10 will go, yeah, we think it's probably a bit unreasonable. Actually, we'll go for, please come in, and it's the right sort of, we think you're right kind of thing.
But again, you're not afraid to having those conversations.
Absolutely not. Or withdrawing if we don't think
Exactly.
it's possible or we can achieve it.
And that's all through your process. So it's not, we've just done a, finger in the air. It's 100,000 there or thereabouts. You've put that data into your systems. You've spat out what you think that true estimate is. And then you've actually got, the bones to work with to say, look, client, person, this is what we estimate this job to be. And that was with everything included. This is not just making things up. This is everything.
At the end of the day, every event's different.
Of course.
You can't copy paste an event. Even if it's a regular, an annual event, it's different. It's not, it's not as easy as, a formulaic 6 of them and 3 of them. It's, it's much more complex than that.
Yeah. And then we hear feedback post along the lines of things like, oh, well, when we'd started this project with the company we went for, then we were about a month in and we were told we've used all the time of this person X. And you're like, what did you expect? I mean, or it's, we've taken this, we've gone with this agency, but we think we're going to have to increase their budget because they haven't got enough time in. So what's the point? It's kind of, it starts to become counterproductive because it's a massive amount of time for the client as well. To sort of put the brief together, to wade through all the presentations, to then sit in the pitches, to then do all the procurement. We know it's a huge amount of time for them as well. So make it count.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that leads us to the end. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and for such an honest and practical and inspiring look at what it means from behind the scenes, because I think, I don't know what clients and customers have in their mind about what happens behind the scenes of an agency unless we invite them in to come and meet with us and have that, extended chemistry meeting. But it's really good. So whether it's finance, operations, sustainability, you're obviously proof that people making the biggest impact don't always have to shout the loudest. So well done you. So to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to The Last Word. We'll be back soon with more stories from people challenging the norm, shifting perspectives and shaping the future of events industry and beyond. And if you have enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe and leave us a review. And to help, well, obviously it helps others find the show too. So if you're feeling extra generous, share it with somebody who you think would love it. And until next time, thank you, Nikki.
Pleasure. Cut.